This case takes place in the United Kingdom on the 8th of September 2012. Jay Whiston was a 17-year-old lad from Clacton, Essex. At the time, he was completing his A-levels and was described as a well-liked and popular young man. He also seemed to be somewhat of a watch guy and was the proud owner of a Tag Heuer watch. Like many people of his age, Jay would attend house parties, and one such event was planned for the 8th of September 2012. The event was planned through Facebook and invitations were handed out, but people could also bring other people too, within reason. But of course, these kinds of parties always end up getting a little bit too rowdy. Either too many people end up attending, or the wrong kinds of people make themselves welcome. When the night rolled around, Jay had second thoughts. He had planned to go, but when the time came, he decided not to. Instead, he wanted to just stay home, eat pizza with his mother, and relax. However, his friends began messaging him, asking him to change his mind and come to the party. Jay stuck to his word, but after his friends called him on the phone, he changed his mind. He got dressed, met up with his friends, and the group made their way to the event. With the party in full swing, over 100 people had gathered to the house, which was more than the host was expecting. An 18-year-old male by the name of Edward Redman had also made his way to the party, along with some of his friends. One of these friends was 19-year-old Reese Hennebury, who was known to be a rather violent individual. When this group of friends arrived at the house party, other people who were attending began to feel uncomfortable. Those who were there would later recall the group bringing an air of unease and tension, and that they were spreading an air of fear. At some point during the night, an altercation began. Jay and his friends were walking near an alleyway round where the house party was going on, and Edward and his friends were walking the other way. One of Jay's friends was holding a bottle of whiskey. Upon seeing the whiskey, Edward demanded that he hand over the bottle so he could take a drink. Jay's friend declined to give over the bottle, but this refusal to do so resulted in Edward becoming aggressive and violent. Edward swung and punched Jay's friend in the face. Jay then got in between the two groups and tried to defuse the situation. Jay said to Edward's group, "We don't want any trouble," hoping to put an end to the violence. However, Edward had no intention of being amicable. He instead punched Jay in the face. Edward then pulled out a knife and stabbed Jay in the chest. Jay, in a tremendous amount of shock and pain, began staggering forward. As he staggered, Edward's friend Reese was heard saying, "I'm going to bottle him." Reese then grabbed a glass bottle and smashed the bottle over Jay's head. Not quite content with the cowardly attack so far, Edward approached Jay, who was trying to flee, and stabbed him a second time in the abdomen. After this second attack, Edward and Reese left together. As they fled from the scene, others heard them saying, "Let's get out of here, and we'll stick together through this." At around 10 p.m, a woman heard a knock at the door. She got up to answer it. Upon opening the door, she was met with two young men, Jay and one of Jay's friends. The woman would later recall seeing a large amount of blood seeping through his clothing. Jay's friend told the woman that Jay had been stabbed and asked for some help. The woman ran inside her house and made a call to the emergency services. As she was on the phone, she ran back to Jay and his friend, but when she returned, she found Jay on her porch lying on his back, making groaning noises. The emergency services rushed to the scene and began treating Jay. He was swiftly taken to hospital, but sadly, not long after arriving, Jay passed away, and his family were informed of the devastating news. Meanwhile, Edward and Reese were on a bus getting away from the scene. The two were captured on the CCTV on the bus, and during this journey, Edward received a message informing him that Jay was dead, and that the police were now looking for him. On screen now is the footage. Edward was laughing and joking in the footage as he read messages on his phone from his friends who were still at the murder scene, seeing the police and ambulance turn up and Jay being taken away. But then, as you can see, Edward can be seen putting his hand over his mouth in shock as he reads a text message. It's believed that it was this exact moment when he discovered that he was now a murderer. After being told that Jay was dead, Edward began to panic and made a number of phone calls to his brother, father, and girlfriend. Edward began to plan how to try and get away with the murder. He spoke to his family and girlfriend about how best to cover his tracks. After discussing this, they all began deleting the text messages and phone calls from their phones. Edward then made his way to his girlfriend's house and tried his best to distance himself from the police. He and his girlfriend then burned his blood-stained clothing and he got changed into some new clothes. His brother and father also helped dispose of some of the evidence. Edward and Reese were taken into custody. The two were very well known to the police. Both had a history of being violent. Reese quickly admitted to assaulting Jay before the trial would take place. Edward, however, denied murdering Jay, despite a number of eyewitnesses. The police began to investigate the phones of Edward and those close to him. 400 statements were taken in connection with the case, and the police examined 72 mobile phones to further understand what happened. As I said earlier, the messages and calls were deleted. Edward's clothing and the knife were disposed of with the help of his father, brother, and girlfriend. The police were able to recover deleted messages where someone asked Edward if he had killed Jay, to which he replied, "Yes, I did." This person then asked Edward why he would do such a thing. Edward replied, "I didn't mean to," and went on to say that a fight broke out because they were all drunk. When recovering deleted messages from the mobile phones, the police were able to see that Edward's father, brother, and girlfriend had all tried to hide evidence. All three were arrested on suspicion of tampering with evidence, but they all denied the charges. The trial was delayed for some time, but finally took place in 2014. The prosecution team presented a large amount of evidence, such as statements and deleted and recovered messages, highlighting the one where Edward admitted to killing Jay. When it came time for the defense to make their case, Edward's barrister told the jury he would not be calling any evidence on behalf of Edward. The same went for Edward's father, Gary Redman, Edward's brother, John Redman, and Edward's girlfriend, Shannon. They provided no defense as to why they hid and destroyed evidence. Reese was jailed for 3 years for attacking Jay and for another attack the night before. It's reported that he bragged on Facebook how he would be locked up and would only serve half of the time. Jay's mother was disgusted and remarked how someone capable of smashing a bottle over the head of someone who had been stabbed needed more punishment. Since being released, Reese has committed other crimes and has been arrested and sentenced a number of times. Edward's father and brother, Gary and John Redman, were jailed for 2 years each for perverting the course of justice. Edward's then girlfriend, Shannon, was jailed for 9 months for the same offence. Edward was found guilty of murder and was sentenced to a minimum term of 17 years. Disgustingly, Edward actually tried to launch an appeal against his conviction, despite the fact that he presented no evidence during the trial. He will not be able to apply for parole until 2030. The case of Jay is incredibly tragic. Sadly, knife crime in the United Kingdom is all too common. Jay was one of over 200 people that year who died due to a knife attack. And the fact that all of this happened over just a drink adds to the horror. How someone could take a life over something so trivial is just mind-boggling. After Jay was murdered, his mother Caroline founded a charity called Only Cowards Carry. The charity has educated more than 20,000 school children about the dangers of carrying knives. But the charity closed in 2019 due to a lack of funding. After the charity closed, Caroline's nephew was also killed in a knife attack in 2021. 18-year-old Luke Belfield, a very promising boxer, died from a single stab wound to his heart. On display in Caroline's house is Jay's beloved Tag Heuer watch, which strangely stopped working on the very night he was killed. She has said that what happened to Jay is always on her mind when she washes dishes, cooks meals, or sees a car of the same colour as Jay's, and thinks about what happened that night as she falls asleep, thinking about how close Jay was to staying in that night.